Welcome back, custom car fans. Another BK project update for you today. I've done quite a lot since the last video, which was a little bit more than a week ago now, and it's been mostly focused on electrical. So I'm going to run you through what we've done there because Lee's been absolutely fantastic and smashed on with the electrics, and then I'll also run you through what I've been up to while he's been doing that, nominally the brakes, the fuel system, header tank, coolant system, and trying to get the aircon side of things squared away. So let's get into it. Oh, this is where Lee spent a lot of time in the cab, as you can see by all the wiring here. So the Dakota digital control boxes are all wired in. I think the only thing left to do is the antenna for the GPS speedo, but I've got a trick little spot to put that. Took a bit of thinking because most of the stuff available is horrible, ugly shark fin aerials, which obviously we don't want. So we've got our down-to-earth fuse box in, that's covering the main things like the lights and indicators and all that jazz. And then we've got some additional fuse boxes in the front here, which we've yet to wire in because we've just been waiting on these. But these are handling the majority of the power distribution to the engine, the stereo, things like that. So we're going to have one as a permanent live and then one as a switch live bank. So we can take all our feeds from there. We've got our Optima red top in, we've got the horn in and wired up, washer bottle in and wired up. Yeah, we're getting there now. All the lights are in and working. We've sorted that, and we've sorted the ECU and the power distribution from the BMW on the engine side of things. That's that little rail there. So that's all in place. I've just got to connect the OBD2 there onto the side for diagnostics. Oh yeah, and we've also made an extension harness for the shifter. Now, normally a shifter would be mounted on the center tunnel, so it doesn't need a very long tail in the House of Torque loom for most applications. But because ours is up here, if you've seen the other videos, you will have seen how we've made this funky looking version of the original shifter. We needed to extend the wiring to get up to that. And the other thing I'm sorting at the moment, just waiting on the control cable, is also extending the control cable for the shifter and therefore gear selection. So that'll probably end up being in the next episode. But for this episode, we've gone through finishing the brakes. We've located the header tank up here and obviously the wiring. So let's get into a bit more detail on some of those jobs. Oh, it's always a good day when that turns up. Hell Performance, thank you guys. Yes. With the stainless braided hoses and the pink sleeve. Woo. Moving on to the brakes now that we've got the body back on, and I've got the lovely Hell Performance brake lines here. I need some retaining brackets, so I've just made some little brackets out of some aluminium angle iron, and I've just got to work out where to put them. Now in the factory car they're slightly forward of the strut, but that's going to cause me issues with my inner wheel arch plate, and there's a lot going on at the front here. They've got the alternator, the fuel distribution, everything sort of packed in there. Whereas back here, I've got a clear bit of space where I can come up around the chassis and up into the engine bay with my hard lines. So I'm just going to flip that there. I will check by turning the steering that we're not going to experience any problems with it fouling on anything. just countersunk the holes, some countersunk fixings, and that will just smooth things out, so when I'm doing up the brake lines there's not any heads in the way, which should be nice. Keeps it all nice and tight to the body, well, the chassis rather. There we go, there's the bracket. So now I need to run a hard line down under the chassis, back up through the engine bay and up to the master cylinder. I also need to do this on the other 3 corners as well. Bracket in, flexi fits lovely, so time to move on to the hard lines now. Second brake line done, and hopefully all correct. So easy to mess these up. You've got to really take your time and think about everything. Get the bends in the right direction at the right angle. Get the fittings on before you flare the end. Allow enough after a bend to get a fitting on and get it in the flaring tool. Otherwise you've got to be a bit creative and sometimes work backwards with it. Anyway, second one. I've put a clip in there that will keep that away from that seam down there. All right, let's go in the wheel arch and see what we've got in there. And here it is. So I just got to squeeze that up slightly. I had to open that to flare it. Oh, look at that. So I've measured up for the passenger side brake line. Let's get this straightened up. And so it comes down into the wheel arch, and we'll put another U-bend on the bottom of this to come up into here. Try and make it look as similar to the other side as possible, you see. Got the end bent and it lines up perfectly, so now it's time to put some unions on the end. Right, so we make sure we've got our unions slid on. You wouldn't believe how easy it is to flare the end and then realise you've not put your fitting on. And then these are a DIN Op1 flare, so that's the position on the turret that I've got selected. And I like to have this just proud of the die ever so slightly. There we go, there's our flare. Sits nice and square against the DIN unions. Now it's time to do the other end, which is a little more tricky because we've got the U-bend, and I'm hoping we've got just enough straight on there. Oh, it's very tight, but I reckon we'll be all right. I'm just going to open that up slightly, just to get my fitting down that little bit further. Yep, perfect. Might need to put a bit of grease on that. There we go. The other end flared as well, and obviously I'll just have to gently squeeze that U-bend back up to line it all up. Let's go put it in the vehicle. So we'll thread it on through. There we are. So obviously I've got the retaining clips to put in between the two before I tighten them up. I've got some body retaining clips like the other side to put on the back of here to hold that in place, and around down here, similar to what I've popped on here. And then I need to put a couple more when I bolt this panel in, just like that. I've done down the bottom up here, and then a couple of clips across the top as well, and then that's it. So that's the front circuit done. Now it's time to feed one all the way down to the back. It's amazing how often you see new brake lines made and they've just unfilled the coil by hand. It's not straight. The bends are just formed with their thumbs or across their leg. And it doesn't take much more to do the job nice and straight and square and accurate. And then you get the nice Hell Performance brake lines on the end with a pink sheath, and you are winning at life. So that's the brakes in, all plumbed. Right, I'm making up a plate for the ECU and the engine power distribution bank, which is like fuses, relays, stuff like that to go in the engine bay. And I need to add a bit of stiffness. We've got 2mm aluminium. It's pretty stiff, there's not much load on it, but a couple of beads will help no end. So unlike when I'm doing the sort of inlaid panels, I go full depth on these beads straight away, right from the start, right to the end, in one single operation. There we go. Because then I can crisp up the ends with a little technique I'll show you in a second. And there we go, instantly much stiffer. As promised, I like to share any little gems that I've learned from other people or just come across doing this sort of work. And one of the best things that I learned, I can't take the credit for, I think it was Lazzy, a bit of a legend when it comes to sheet metal shaping, shared this little tip for finishing the end of your beads. So what you'll find when you run a couple of beads in a panel is the start and the stop are a little bit blurred. They're not like a crisp, defined shape if you use a bead roller. Now, if you use a machine like the big green Trump behind us or a Pullmax, you can use different tooling to achieve that crisp end. But with the bead roller, as you pull that down, you don't get that defined end on them. So the little tip that I learned from Lazzy uses some of these. Now, these are just hollow punches, as used in like leather making and making parts from leather, paper, card. And what they are is basically just a bit of tube with a hole in the end and a bevel and a sharp edge so that you can punch a hole, knock out the centers. What we're going to do is just cut a section of that out so we end up with a half round, and we're going to match the size of those to the bead, and then we're going to basically tap on the end of the bead where we want the sharpness to be transferred into the panel, and that will give us a lot crisper end detail on the bead. So I'm going to show you how we do that. We'll just select one. I've bought this whole new set for me because I'm missing a couple of the ones that I needed in the correct size. So it's a perfect opportunity to show you just how easy it is. I think these were about 10 quid on eBay for this full set, and this should cover all eventualities. Now, first up, I'm going to select the right size punch. So I'm just going to measure the width of the bead, and we're about 15, 16 mil, somewhere around that. So what I'm looking to do is find one. That one's about 14. Let's see how much bigger the next one is. Okay, so that's about 16. So let's try this one first and see how we get on with that. So what I'm going to do on this open side, I'm just going to cut the section that is still intact on the punch, and then that will give us what we need for our application. What you'll find is when you cut that out, you're left with more than 50% of the tube left in situ. So what we're going to do is you're just going to carefully grind that back a bit further. Actually, I might just file that. And I'm actually going to take a little bit of the corner off so we don't get too sharp a point that then just digs in, especially when you're working with aluminium. Now you don't need to buy anything fancy when it comes to these punches because you're cutting them up, and really you could just use a bit of tube if you happen to have a bit of tube the right size. That would work just as well. I've just always found this to work pretty well. It's a cheap and easy way of getting a whole selection of sizes of tube as well in one go. As with anything like this, it's always important to run a few tests on a bit of scrap like this. And all you're looking to do now is basically line up the sides with the end of what I call the tram line. So the marks from the tooling, that's usually a really good place to start. So you're going to line that up and you're going to try and keep it as flat as possible to the sheet, and one swift tap. I'm going to show you a lot closer up this time. So this is off the bead roller, a little bit blurred on each end, just lacking definition. You'll see that the sheet has got some ripples to it. It's a bit bent because of the form that's been pushed in here. And hopefully by using this technique, we're going to redress some of that form. We're going to flatten that back out, and we're going to add some definition to these beads. So let's get started. I mean, straight away, hopefully you can see the difference that's made. That has flattened that section of the sheet out. We've got a nice crisp end on each end, top and bottom. Let's do the next one. And the little baby one. There we go. Massive difference, and just makes for a much more professional looking finish rather than those blurred ends. The sheet is a lot flatter as a result as well. Next task on this ECU mount is I want to put a slight radius on this edge just to roll it around the strut brace, but being 2mm aluminium and a very small area that needs to move, I'm going to just anneal this to give it a helping hand, because I tried it on a bit of scrap and it's pretty hard work to get that to go around, and it's just kinked it slightly. So hopefully annealing that will do the job. I best take the plastic off before I do that, mind. Let's see what we get now that I've annealed this. Hopefully we get some movement. I'm pushing it pretty hard into the die because it's wanting to drive it out. But it seems to be doing something. Yeah, nice. It's a little bit of a roll there. Much better. Run that through again. God, what a difference that makes. I knew it would make a little bit of difference, but perfect. Just gonna try it in, see how it looks. Back at the angry fire-breathing dragon, ready to cut some aluminium. This is for the clamp down strip for the ECU. Let's go. Lee the legend on the old crimping tool here, look. Getting the power and grounds and the wiring system today while I secure the engine stuff. Oh yeah, oh yeah, I think that'll work. I'm going to put a little bit of foam underneath the ECU and also on the inside of the bracket just to stop it rattling, but I think that's going to do the job. Well, I've marked out and drilled for riv nuts. So now it's time to set those riv nuts in the sheet, and that way we can unclamp the bracket from the top without worrying about nuts dropping off the back into the engine bay. Simples. Well, there we go, decent bit of progress in this episode. Unfortunately, I have missed a few bits because we've been so busy focusing on getting this thing progressed. Things like we've pressure tested the fuel tanks, so we know they're all good. So they can go in now and connect up the fuel system. Yeah, I'll try harder to record everything next time so that we've got plenty of detail for you. Thanks again for watching, folks. Please click all those buttons that everyone tells you to. It really does mean a lot, and feel free to comment below. I try and get back to everybody on there because it's great to get some feedback on everything that we're doing here. So check you in the next one.